all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life? Well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting, especially since they're helping to fund all the cool projects we have in the works, such as the Positive Head app, the docuseries that I'm intending to begin shooting within the next year, and whatever else we dream up over here at Positive Headquarters to help spread consciousness across the planet. Now, if you're short on time or just super excited for today's topic and want to dive right in and skip these ads, feel free to fast forward about
2.5 minutes
to get right into today's show. That being said, I strongly encourage you to listen because the reason I'm passionate about my sponsors is because they've made a huge impact in my own life, which is why I've aligned with these organizations. And I firmly believe they can do the same for you too. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm extremely passionate about promoting is Purium. The reason I've aligned Positive Head with Purium is because I wholeheartedly stand behind their mission to end human suffering by making superfoods easily available to everyone, with the ultimate goal to help restore mankind's harmony with nature in the process. I mean, what a noble mission, right? It's no mystery that you need to bring your mind, body, and spirit into balance if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and grandest version of themselves. And for me, for years, I honestly felt like I was ahead of the curve in the mind and spirit category, but I was only average at best in the level of care I administered to my body. Sure, I was healthy-ish when it came to the food I put into my system, but after doing a Purium 40-day transformation with a 10-day metabolic reset and cleanse, I can honestly say I have reestablished my relationship with food in a very positive way. Not only did I drop the extra weight that I was carrying as a natural byproduct of the transformation so that I'm now at my ideal body weight, but I continue to feel like my best self by starting every day with an organic Purium power shake that is made from raw superfood ingredients that were meticulously harvested, thoughtfully combined to optimize the nutritional impact it has on my body. I view the shake as plant medicine, really, and it happens to taste really delicious, and I can make it in about 30 seconds. There's actually 4 core Purium products that I take every day, and honestly, I intend to do so for the rest of my life for a very scientifically sound reason. And if you want to learn more about those reasons, you can go check out my video at positivehead.com/transformation, where I go into more detail. If you end up buying any of the Purium products, be sure and use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for a 25% discount. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's Powwow episode, I'm very excited to have Arjuna Adargh here with me on the show. Arjuna is a 9-time author, has coached more than 2,000 other coaches, has shared his insights and wisdom at companies like Google and organizations such as the United Nations, and now he's going to do the same for all of us P-heads here today. Super happy to have you. Arjuna, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's been nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Okay, so let's start at the very predictable beginning. My listeners know I always like to start with the same question, end with the same question on these powwows. You're in an elevator. The gal next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Well, what I've noticed is in my life and in everybody I've coached and everybody I know, that real fulfillment comes through contribution. You know, we think that we think we're going to become happy through making more money or through finding your soulmate or living forever. But actually, people who are deeply fulfilled, people whose lives are dripping with meaning and purpose and satisfaction and gratitude, have found a way to make an indisputable contribution to as many people as possible in as deep a way as possible. And this book, my latest book, Radical Brilliance, is really a guidebook on how to make an incredible contribution.
I love that. And, you know, it makes me instantly think of one of my favorite quotes by Gandhi. If you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others.
There you go.
And
wow, that's awesome.
It's a good one, right?
Yes.
Well, why don't we do this before we dive into Radical Brilliance and all the brilliant work you've been doing in the world? Maybe give us a little background into your story. I like to have I always appreciate having a little backdrop into, what led you to the unique path that you've chosen in life.
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of stuff.
That's chosen you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've actually pursued many different avenues in the quest for fulfillment. And why do any of us do any of these things? I mean, cats I don't think sit on the deck pondering how could I become a mega cat, and
true.
And fleas don't go to motivational seminars to get all pumped up, yes, you could do it, you could pump more blood this week. I don't think, as far as I know, we're the only mammal, the only creature that gets so obsessed with wanting to make ourselves better. And that's actually because of the highly developed prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex in human beings, in Homo sapiens, it allows us two things. First of all, it allows us to reflect upon the quality of our lives, to kind of have a cognitive understanding of how good is my life. But the other thing is it allows us to fantasize or to imagine how good could my life be. And this combination of reflecting on what's here and reflecting on what could be is both a blessing and a curse, because it's a blessing because it allows you to create new amazing things. It's a curse because it creates discontent in a way that other species don't experience it. So I have, that gap between your intuition of what's possible and your awareness of what's here, that gap is what creates evolutionary tension. And like everybody, I've tried to fulfill that, to bridge that gap in many ways through spirituality. Originally, I got involved in meditation and so on in my teens, through psychotherapy, particularly kind of alternative, cutting edge psychotherapy, to kind of heal myself of my family of origin through taking a kind of psychic enema. I've aimed to be successful, to make money, to have influence. I've tried all kinds of things to find real fulfillment and meaning in life. But really, the big break came for me, funnily enough, with a car accident. Seems kind of perhaps strange and unusual, but I had a really serious car accident a little bit more than 2 years ago, where logically you could say I kind of should have died. If you looked at the car afterwards, you would drive by that car by the side of the freeway and you'd cross yourself and say, well, I guess that guy didn't make it, because the car was demolished. But mysteriously, I had no broken bones. But after that accident, I was laid up for and not with broken bones, actually just with shock. I just couldn't go out of the house for a while. It was such a strong impact that my whole body became frozen. And during that time, I was very busy. I actually ran a coaching school. I trained more than 2,000 people to be coaches. So during that time, my coaching school was kind of buzzing along on its own, but I really went into an imposed hiatus. And laying there in the bed in a kind of darkened room, these big questions started to emerge, like why are we here? These kind of, quintessential questions, like, why am I here? What's the meaning of it all? Am I really fulfilling my life purpose? And in that gap, slowly, like a jigsaw puzzle where you don't quite know what the final picture is going to be, like a jigsaw puzzle, these different components revealed themselves to me of the components that are really necessary for a life that has true depth and meaning, that is truly fulfilling. And through a process of revelation that really happened over a few months, this radical brilliance cycle emerged.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, it's very interesting how oftentimes people, it's the traumatic events that really lead to breakthroughs for so many, and oftentimes we judge those, or think about, well, I don't want anything. I want my journey to be as smooth as silk, and it rarely manifests that way, and typically it is, the traumatic events that really jolt people into the next chapter of their own process, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would not advocate going out and intentionally getting into a car accident for that reason. But
definitely not.
If it happens, it can be a blessing. Yeah.
Right. Well, excellent. Well, before we dive into, your latest book and your work in general, one of the things that you and I talked about at the top of, before we started actually recording, you started referencing a little bit about the cycle blockage and practice, and how that's sort of a great foundational thing to understand, as we go about discussing all the things that we're going to discuss. So would you mind just giving us a little further insight, giving me a little further insight, and of course the listeners insight from the beginning on that whole thought, that whole practice?
Sure, absolutely. So this is really what the book Radical Brilliance is about, this cycle, really. So, this began, as I said, with the question when I was laid up after this car accident, the question of what is the key to real fulfillment, to really living a life where you feel deeply relaxed, deeply content, where you really feel kind of fully spent each day. Yes, I gave it fully, and you can sleep well at night. And so we can make an analogy, to health. Okay. So if we were to ask, well, what is the key to perfect health? It's actually not one thing, is it? So for example, if we were to think about health, you would not say, you could say, well, yeah, in order to be healthy, you need regular elimination. You need to go to the bathroom every day. If you don't go to the bathroom for 3 days in a row, you're going to become unhealthy. Well, that is true. But on the other hand, if you use that insight to spend your entire life in the bathroom and only in the bathroom, that would not be the key to health. You need the bathroom, but you also need to eat good food as well. So you need to put the food in, take the waste out. That's the key to health. Equally, you could say, well, in order to be healthy, you need to get enough sleep at night. Well, that's true. But if you spent your entire day in bed focusing on getting enough sleep, you wouldn't be healthy. You also need to exercise. So these things are opposites. You see, like eating good food, going to the bathroom are opposites. Getting enough sleep, exercising are opposites. So you could understand now that good health is actually the mixture of opposite things. So in the same way, brilliance. Okay, brilliance. What we mean by brilliance is becoming a vehicle, a conduit for original life-changing ideas to enter the world. That you become, just like, Albert Einstein didn't actually try through effort to create the general theory of relativity. He was actually laying in the bathtub and it was revealed to him. So we could ask, well, how does it happen? Why is it that some people receive these incredible revelations that change the world for everybody? Steve Jobs, by the way, said the same thing, that the big innovations that came with Apple, they didn't come through effort. They came through receiving. And Steve Jobs actually referenced many mind-changing, consciousness-changing experiences, including psychedelic drugs and going to India and doing different mystical practices to change his consciousness to be able to receive brilliant impulses. So now we could ask, okay, so what are the components that allow for a brilliant life. And that's what was really revealed to me after this car accident. So we can think of this something like a clock, with 12 at the top. A clock has 12 at the top, 3 is on the right, 6 is on the bottom, and 9 is on the left.
Right.
So I'm going to describe, first of all, 4 sort of stations on the clock, but this is actually not about stations, it's about movement. But if we first understand the stations and get those clear, then we can understand the movement between the stations. So the first station will be at 12, and that is what we can loosely describe as moments of awakening. And that means moments where you transcend the usual limits of your mind. The mind is usually preoccupied with boundaries of time and space, so your mind can think about things that has limits. It can't really comprehend limitlessness, but you can actually have an experience of limitlessness. And that is, that happens in many ways. It happens through meditation and spiritual practice. It also happens when you have an orgasm, when you have sex, your mind goes temporarily limitless. It happens with extreme sports. If you go skiing and jump off a double black diamond cliff, you're going to have you're going to be out of your mind while you're negotiating.
Right.
So there are many ways to have boundaryless consciousness, and in fact, a lot of things we do in life, like having sex that's not for procreation, or like extreme sports, when you experience boundarylessness, that is where you actually feel the relief from the confines of the mind. So that's awakening at the top. The next station will be 3 o'clock. And those are moments of creative flow. Now, that's different. That's different psychological experience, but it's also different brain activity involved, different brain chemistry. So at 3 o'clock is creative flow. Everything is just flowing through you on its own. It's like musicians jamming together. It's like a writer who's just can't stop writing. It's like an innovator where there's new ideas are flowing. So this is the dimension of creative flow. That's 3 o'clock. 6 o'clock is about accomplishment. Again, completely different subjective experience, completely different brain functioning. Accomplishment means getting things done within boundaries, meeting deadlines, meeting budget, keeping agreements. Finally, 9 o'clock, it's actually about learning and humility. Also a very different subjective experience, very different brain chemicals involved. It's where we learn and integrate and become fully cognizant of the limitations of our humanness. So those are 4 stations: awakening, flow, achievement or accomplishment, and learning or humility. But here's the deal, is actually this cycle is not really about being at a station. It's about being in movement. So I'm just going to go back through that briefly and explain 4 different movements, because wherever you find yourself in this cycle, you're not at a point, you're always in movement. So the first movement then is from awakening to flow. And that begins with a little seed. It begins, you can imagine like an arrow, with a point at the beginning and a full arrowhead at the end. So it begins with the seed at 12 o'clock. And the seed is of the finest impulses of creative flow. So actually, if you just relax, completely hover in a state of stillness or infinity, there is subtle energetic vibration happening. This requires patience, sensitivity, but there's a kind of subtle vibration there's a tradition in northern India, in Kashmir, called Kashmiri Shaivism, and in that tradition they call this spanda, the subtlest vibration. And that builds between 12 and 3, that builds from a vibration to flow. So that's the movement from 12 to 3 is the constant increasing of this vibration. So it becomes, it starts as the tiniest whisper. At 3 o'clock, it becomes a symphony. It begins as just the faintest idea. By 3 o'clock, it becomes full-on writing. So this is the movement from the tiniest impulse to creative flow. That's the first movement. The next movement is between 3 and 6, and that is the movement between intention and accomplishment. So intention is actually a creative impulse. See, it is a form of creativity, but intention is creativity projected into the future. So that's the movement from 3 to 6, is the movement from an intention, I'm going to make this happen, to actually making it happen at 6. But the next movement is from 6 to 9. Interesting thing, at 6 o'clock, when you're fully in accomplishment, there is a phenomenon that kicks in, which we never expect, it's what Gregory Bateson in the 20th century described as the double bind. Double bind means that when you're forced to make decisions, which is what happens at 6 o'clock, you're forced to make choices and to be accountable for your choices. When you make decisions, which is inevitable to accomplishment, you are always going to experience some degree of regret. Because you're choosing between this and that, the thing that you didn't choose is going to inevitably produce some form of regret. And that regret is the seed at 6 o'clock. It's the seed of self-doubt. It's at least fleetingly feelings of regret, shame, failure, remorse, inadequacy, like, oh, I messed up. And that's the movement between 6 and 9. It's the movement from regret to humility. And so that's where we pass through learning. You see, you learn from your mistakes. You can integrate from your mistakes. You can actually constantly readjust to becoming a deeper and a more present person. So by the time you get to 9, you're fully drenched in humility. You realize that you're not
right.
You're not God's gift to everybody. You have a gift to give, but you also have limitations. And finally, at 9 o'clock, comes the intuition of something beyond your mind. So that means you have an intuition of, if you wanted to turn that inwardly, you'd say something bigger than your mind. You could call it your higher self or your true self. If you turn it outwardly, it would be a kind of religious intuition or a devotional intuition of the divine. And so the movement from 9 to 12 is actually where spirituality and devotional practice comes, which is the movement from I'm very small as we move around to 12 to realizing what is bigger than what I've taken to be me. So that's the cycle, the movement, constantly moving from awakening to flow, from flow to accomplishment, from accomplishment to humility, and from humility to awakening. That's the brilliant cycle.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really great to have as a context to understanding all of life's doings, right? Where am I at in this never-ending cycle of being? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the latest book, Radical Brilliance, and you did a lot of as someone who interviews once a week and has 700 and some shows at this point, maybe 750 episodes. There's a lot of interviews in there, but 420 of them aren't interviews, and that's how many you did with extraordinary, brilliant, and influential people. And I would love to have some insight into, obviously we can't cover all 420 today, but who were some of the most brilliant people that you talked to?
Well, somebody that stands out right away is Lynn Twist, who she was one of the co-founders of the Hunger Project back in the 70s. She raised $2.2 billion to alleviate world hunger.
Wow.
When she was at the peak of that and thought that she just didn't have time to do anything else, she came in contact, and again, this was more like a revelation than a choice. She came in contact with the Achwa people, who at that point were completely isolated. They had no contact with the outside world in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. So she founded the Pachamama Alliance, and she's since that time has managed to put millions of acres of the Amazon rainforest into perpetual land trust, so it can never be touched by oil companies or other kind of big money. So she's saving the rainforest. So she's somebody who really was a fabulous interview, because she's very quick to point out that when you find a way to make a massive difference, we often think of it as a sacrifice. But she pointed out, you don't give up anything. You're not sacrificing anything. You get everything and you lose nothing, because all the real fulfillment and meaning, all the depth, all the joy in life comes from the privilege of making a difference to other people. So she was really instrumental in helping me see that making a contribution, it's not altruistic in the way that we often think of. It's actually the same way to have a good life, you know?
You know, it's funny. I talk about this a lot on the show. I call it the good kind of selfish. And my belief that is indeed a true statement that you just made is, you know, ties into my own spiritual perspective, which we discuss a lot on the show, that sort of thing. And the idea that, all is literally one. It's all is an extension of self. The consciousness that animates every other form is the same consciousness that animates my form. And therefore, by serving others, it's a good kind of selfish. I'm actually serving an extension of self, and I'll feel the energetic repercussions of that activity. And that's sort of my underlying belief system as to why that, why that phenomenon that you just explained actually works the way it does.
Exactly. You know, Brendan, do you have children?
I do. I have one.
Yeah. How old is your child?
He's 19. He's not so much of a child as he once was. Well, he's 19 years old.
He'll always be your boy. Yeah. Well,
he will, for sure.
I raised two boys. They're also adults now, but I raised two boys. Okay. And there was a period where I was a single father. So, I was divorced from their mother. I was not yet remarried. So it was just me and the kids. And I had an interesting life at that time because all of my income, I live in a very small town in the Sierra Nevada foothills. I have for 20 years. So all of my income producing happened in other places. So I would drop them off at school on a Monday and then drive straight to the airport and get on a plane and go and work for a week. And then I would work through Sunday because I was teaching seminars. And then on Monday, I would fly home to Sacramento, get in my car and drive directly to the school and pick up the boys. And then I had a week of looking after the boys. That was my week on. So my life would be, get as much work as I could done. And then at 3:00, I would drive to the school to pick them up, get them in the car. We'd go to the grocery store, buy the groceries. We didn't do any frozen food or prepared food. We did everything from fresh ingredients. So we'd come home, cook the dinner, do homework, wash the dishes, prepare breakfast for the next day, pack lunches, and then hopefully I'd get them off to bed, at 8:00, 8:30. Then I would do some more cleanup and finally fall asleep. Now, it happens sometimes in that lifestyle, that one of my sons would wake up in the night. For example, he might be, vomiting, like he was sick. So, I would hear, 2:00 in the night, "Daddy, Daddy." I would go running, and he'd thrown up. Maybe it was the first time in his life he'd ever vomited. He didn't know what was happening, So he's scared. And now, when I'm woken up at 2:00 in the night, in that way, when I'm woken up, I don't lie in bed and think to myself, what is my true purpose? What is really authentic for me right now? Where is my calling? I know exactly what to do. And any parent knows this. You know what to do. When your child needs you, when your child is in trouble, you know exactly what to do. There is no doubt or hesitation whatsoever. You jump up and you run. And you take care of everything. But the thing is, not only do you have to, change all the sheets and mop everything up and give medicine, but you need to do it with kindness as well, because this is a sick child. You need to do it with kindness. So I learned at that time that when you are called upon for something that you have to do, you can do it. Even in the middle of the night, you can do it, and you can do it with kindness. And I realized, that was a training for me. That was like a boot camp, for many years, having to show up, even when I didn't, quotes, feel like it, but having to show up as a dad with kindness. And it taught me that you can live your life that way. When it's clear what you have to do, you can show up even when you don't feel like it, even when it doesn't fit your desires, you can show up with kindness. And that's really has become a model, because for many people, if I tell that story, many people nod their heads, because as parents, that is very often where we find the deepest fulfillment. That's a relationship where you're giving everything and you're not getting much. There's not an exchange. It's not like, well, I'll change your diapers if you vacuum the carpet. It's like, it's all about giving, but it's also where we find the greatest fulfillment. And I think that's really, is a wonderful little learning we can all have, that it's, we are here to contribute. We are born into life to contribute. Yeah. And when you click in with that, that's where everything becomes alive and magical.
Yeah, and when you think about it from, obviously with your own child, it's much easier to get into that state. And when you think about, okay, well, now the child next door or down the street, or that's starving or not getting water in Africa currently, or something like that. It's it's just like extensions. If we can drum up that much compassion for our own family, what I feel like is happening on the planet, I hope is happening, is we're all sort of expanding that to others around us. And I think this sort of spiritual revolution that appears to be happening, sort of referencing what I referenced earlier, like, oh wow, more and more people are realizing, hold on, this is actually my family. It's not these imaginary lines and borders and things like that, and different packaging, different skin color or ethnicities or what have you are really mean nothing. And this is a part of me that is suffering. And then you get people like Lynn Twist, right, who take action based off of that. So I definitely can relate to that. And some of the greatest moments I've experienced in my life have certainly been serving my child unconditionally, and it's something that I think I will always have that natural inclination to do. And I like to think it's getting more sensitive to others as well, when and where I can, to be the same sort of figure in their life where it's giving, because I just want to help however I possibly can.
Yeah, right. Well, coming back to absolutely, and coming back to the brilliance cycle, the brilliance cycle really describes those 4 movements we discussed a few minutes ago. That really describes the components which coexist for a life of contribution in this way. And what I've noticed is everybody who is really living a brilliant life of contribution has those 4 components active. However, those 4 movements are actually somewhat theoretical. So it's rather like if you think about Chinese medicine. In Chinese medicine, they describe the flow of qi or energy through the meridians. But that flow is actually theoretical, because if you go to the acupuncturist, nobody will have perfectly flowing qi. Everybody's got some excess somewhere and some depletion somewhere. So in the same way, the brilliant cycle we talked about is actually a theoretical model. What we actually see in practice when we bring this into coaching is various kinds of blockage. Now, I've been working with a group of coaches in really unpacking all of this, and we've been able to isolate 4 styles of blockage. And this is where the brilliant cycle really becomes not just a theoretical model, but actually a practical map for how to increase your brilliance, your contribution. So one kind of blockage is addiction, where instead of flowing through the cycle, we get addicted to one of the stations that I described. So you can get addicted to awakening states, you can get addicted to flow, you can get addicted to getting things done, so you become a kind of doaholic, and you can also get addicted to working on yourself and kind of psychotherapy. Another kind of blockage is Another kind of blockage is judgment, where you become disdainful or judgmental of one part of the cycle, and you don't want to go there. A third kind of blockage is called aspiration resistance, where you really aspire to moving on through the cycle, but at the same time, it seems kind of impossible or out of reach. And finally, the last kind of blockage is called looping, where you become a specialist in one little part of the cycle, and you just go round and round and round there, and you forget about the rest. So those are 4 kinds of blockage, right? Addiction, judgment, aspiration resistance, and looping, and they all exist in all 4 of the quadrants that I described. So if you multiply 4 by 4, you've actually got 16 unique flavors of the cycle getting blocked. So it means now, as a coaching method, it's kind of quite brilliant. As a coaching method, either the coaching client is fully on fire, is in a state of passion, giving their gift fully, making the maximum difference to the world, or the cycle is blocked. And if the cycle is blocked, we can quickly recognize any form of blockage can be explained through one of those unique 16 flavors of blockage. And so what began as a theoretical model now becomes an incredibly accurate map to diagnose where brilliance gets blocked and then to apply tailor-made practices to unblock it.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love how you've sort of broken it down to a science like that. It really gives the logical thinker something to grab onto. With a lot of this stuff, where a lot of times it's very it's sort of these theoretical ideas that are harder or more difficult to tie into practicality. And so I really appreciate that. All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. I noticed also that you had Kurt Blackson wrote the foreword to your book, and in that he suggests brilliance is our natural state. It gets covered by conditioning, and is, he was actually a guest on the show a while back. For those of you who are newer listeners, you can go back to episode 341. He's excellent choice for you as a foreword to the book, obviously. And I'm curious how that ties in, when you talk about the whole conditioning piece of it that he referenced.
Absolutely. Yeah. So all of our conditioning is really, the very nature of the word conditioning is in the direction of conformity. So we get conditioned to do things the way they've always been done, and not to ask why, So, when you're a child, you say, well, why do I have to wear a uniform to school? Because that's the way it's done. Don't answer back. So a lot of the conditioning that we get is you do this because that's just the way we do it. But it may be completely illogical. Now, so actually, brilliance, another way of expressing brilliance is to learn to think in a disruptive way, to learn to become a disruptor, to disrupt business as usual. So who says that? Well, a great example right now, a great source of discord and wasted energy in this country is because of this coalescing into two different value sets, one that we call Republican and one that we call Democrat. So it's kind of just understood. Either you're going to identify with the Republican value set, or you're going to identify with the Democrat-Republican set, and then it starts an ideological war. Well, so we could ask, a disruptive way of thinking would be, who says that I have to fully identify with one of those value sets? Maybe I just want to identify with sanity. Maybe I just want to identify with love. Maybe I just want to identify with values that have universal appeal. And then there's many things like that. Who says that it has to be this way? Who says that we have to work 40 hours a week in an office with air conditioning and fluorescent light? Who says you have to do that? Who says that life can't be about fun? And really disruptive thinking means questioning the way we've been conditioned to believe things. And disruptive thinking means that we can think thoughts that have never been thought before. We can say things that have never been said before, and we can take action and make a contribution that has never been done before.
Powerful. Now, you have a bunch of practices that help people to move through these different phases of the cycle, right? Like over 100?
Right. Well, yeah, we've mapped 357 so far, but when you buy the book, you get access to a website that's free. When you buy the book, there's a little URL in the book that's, invites you to register. And in the website, we describe 108 of these practices, 27 in each quadrant. And then we have the global practice community we can talk about later, where you actually get instructions. You get taught how to do these 108 practices. So the important thing about practice is to realize that what I mean by a practice is anything that you do with the intention of deliberately changing your state. Okay? So any activity that you get involved in with the intention of changing your state. So by that definition, sex is a practice. If you're having sex not to make a baby, then why are you having sex? You're having sex so you and your partner can change your state, to become more, have more pleasure, become more ecstatic, have more flowing energy. If you're taking a supplement, why are you taking the supplement? To change your state, particularly if it's like a brain enhancing supplement. If you go to the gym, why are you going to the gym? To change your state. There are lots and lots of things that we do which are basically, the reason we do them is to change your state, either short term or long term. So the wonderful thing about this cycle now is we can develop a really accurate typography, a map, to understand just about any practice you can think of and put it in the context of brilliance, right? Yeah. So you can understand that anything you can think of as state changing, it belongs somewhere in the map. So, for example, well, this is a fairly unusual practice, but just sitting still and paying attention to pockets of pleasure or energy in your body, or paying attention to light inside your body, that would be like a practice soon after 12 o'clock. Then if we move forward, like automatic writing or jamming with musicians, which is, if you just get together to jam together, that changes your state. That would be like a 2:30 practice. Setting intentions like vision board, or anything that's to do with the law of attraction or manifesting, that would be like a 3:30 practice. Completing something on time, like staying up late to get something done because you said you would, that would be like a 5:30 practice. We could continue, and the problem people often have is they want to only practice in a very narrow part of the cycle, and so they become imbalanced. So, for example, there's nothing wrong with manifesting or the law of attraction if you can see that it's part of a bigger cycle. If your entire life becomes about manifesting, you become very narrow. So, in the same way, you mentioned working on yourself. Well, if you go to a psychotherapist or do any kind of psychotherapeutic activity to come to terms with your limitations, to understand pain and trauma, to understand your shadow better, that would be, that would be something like a 7:30 practice. So all of these things have their place, but they all belong within a cycle, and the cycle actually contains any state changing activity that you can think of. Any practice that you can imagine belongs somewhere in this cycle.
Interesting. Yeah, it certainly, a lot of people, as you point this out, I realize how often people get stuck in one area, and balance is everything, and understanding that going through all of these different things are a part of life. And I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to integrate into your perception that, hey, life is meant to flow through all of these different phases. I am curious though, if you had to adopt just one practice tomorrow to sort of enhance your brilliance, do you have any sort of like a foundational practice that helps keep you moving through this cycle, most effectively and efficiently?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question. So if there's one thing that you could do, if there's one thing you could do or integrate into your life that makes the most difference to what you're talking about, that one thing would be no thing, right? So the one thing that actually seems to make the most difference to people becoming brilliant is no thing. In other words, no thing or nothing, which means to actually integrate time into your day where nothing is happening. And nothing is happening. The simplest way to devote time to where nothing is happening, or where you're not doing anything, where you stop doing, is to spend some time to sit. And I like to just keep it to sit. I mean, sitting is a very simple thing. If you've got a dog, your dog can walk, your dog can run, and your dog can sit. A dog can sit, a child can sit, and you can sit. It's not difficult to sit. It just means sit down. Either sit with your bum in the chair and your feet on the floor, or sit cross-legged. It doesn't matter, but sitting, that's all it means. So my advice is take some time, if possible, take half an hour at the beginning of the day where you just sit, where you sit down.
So not meditation necessarily either, right?
I just don't use that word because it makes it into this big deal. Suddenly it's like, meditation. I've got to be good at meditation. I've got to learn meditation. Right. So just think of it as sitting, just sitting. I
like that.
Now, I recommend people to wear a sleep mask or a blindfold. I like the one manufactured by Tempur. It's a little pricey, but the benefit is that it's got padding all around. So you can have your eyes open or your eyes closed. It doesn't make any difference to the light. So if you wear a sleep mask, set your timer for like 30 minutes on your phone so that you don't have to worry about the time. Set your timer, put on the sleep mask or the blindfold, and then just sit. And then it's not up to you what happens. You might have a lot of thoughts, you might not. You might feel restless in your body, you might not. But if you simply sit and there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it. You can't be good at it or not good at it. You just sit there and wait. Things will naturally settle down. You will naturally just have more awareness of that underlying nervousness that happens for all of us. And inevitably, you're that's half an hour that you're not doing anything. You're just sitting, and it's a little gap where brilliance can reveal itself through you. I personally really like to emphasize that you're not doing meditation. And you're not learning meditation. You're not getting good at meditation because it brings back in this kind of person who wants to do stuff. And that is mostly an interference pattern. What's happening is you're just actually taking some time where instead of dancing, you can be danced. Instead of playing, you can be played. And then something bigger than your mind can actually work through you. And I think most of us in one way or another, we have come to recognize a benevolence and intelligence bigger than the human mind. Sometimes we call that God. Sometimes we call it, the universal force of humanity. Sometimes when we experience intimacy with another person, we experience the love that's bigger than both of us. But if you can create a little space in your day where that has a chance to breathe through you, that's where brilliance can find its starting point.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you sort of take away the loadedness of the word meditation. It's one that truly becomes almost this daunting task to some people. I know myself as someone who is very active and definitely spends a lot of time in the cycle of doing and a lot of energy and busy. It's like it's I've experienced it to be challenging to slow down and stop. And then you add the word meditation on top of that. And it's like, not only do you need to slow down and stop, but you need to be doing this specific thing and doing it well, because, right, we all want to do things that we're good at or not do them at all. And so I like the idea of just sitting there. And the way I even think of it is we're always, most of our lives we're transmitting. We're these transmitters, transmitting things, outputting, and really where some of our greatest insights and everything can come. Like you talked about Einstein in the bathtub, is like when you're in a receptive mode, when you're a receiver, because we are both transmitters and receivers, and we're using one part of that equation. We're sort of stuck in that cycle way more than we are in the receptive state, and just taking away all the charged energy around meditation, just saying, okay, just be somewhere, just sit somewhere without any agenda to do anything, and then just let things unfold as they will. I really relate and like that a lot.
Yeah. I think in a way, Brandon, that the big leap that humanity is going through at the moment, of course, it's happening right now in little pockets here and there. But the big leap we're going through really has to do with identity. That because of this developed prefrontal cortex and this kind of sense of me as an instrument of doing, we have come to fully identify ourselves as localized. So it's me, I do this. And of course, there is a certain reality to that. Right now, you and I, we are talking together. So there's an Arjuna and a Brandon talking backwards and forwards. And of course, there is the believable appearance of you doing something, me doing something. If somebody says, "What do you want for lunch?" You're capable of saying, "Oh, I'd like a sandwich." So there is a meaning to the I and the me. However, when we get fully and exclusively trapped in this feeling of I or me as real, and everything else is outside, that is where suffering happens. And that's also where we as human beings become dangerous. Now, we have on our land, we have beehives. And the reason we got the beehives is last year we started our garden, and some of the plants were not getting properly pollinated. So we realized, okay, we need bees. So we got bees. And the interesting thing about the bees is, there's this term queen bee, but it's not accurate. The queen does not rule the hive. She's just really kind of, an egg producer, and there is no bee in charge. A beehive is a fascinating thing because actually all of the bees are just instruments of the hive. The hive itself is the consciousness. And they all behave that way, and they all operate in unison. There's no conflict between bees and a hive. They operate as one entity. And so there's actually that and there's so many places we see that in nature. If you look up in the sky and see a flock of birds, one bird is flying at the front, and that lead bird alternates, but all the birds move absolutely at the same moment together. It's like one consciousness that is the flock. And that really means that for human beings, it means that is, in my opinion, what it means for us to evolve and grow to our next level of consciousness is to see that there is this individuality, but it's actually being fueled by something that we can also relax and identify with, but maybe confusing to the mind that we know. When you relax, you realize that there is an Arjuna, there is a Brendan, there is a John or a Mary or a Joe listening to this. And in a way, we're separate, but in another way, it's the same consciousness fueling all of us, which means right now, in a sort of way that we can't completely understand logically, right now, it's the same consciousness talking with itself. It's the same consciousness that is animating Brandon and Arjuna. Now, we know that. We all know that when we make love, for example. When you have sex, especially when you're coming close to orgasm, there is a way that you're taken over, and sometimes you reach out and you touch a hand and you don't even know if you're touching your hand or your partner's hand because you've become universal. And there's lots of ways that happens, sometimes in emergencies, sometimes in moments of great pleasure, where the sense of I as separate drops away and there's more of a we that's cognizant, that's felt. And that's actually where we relax, we let go, we are dance. I like to go, I love to learn things, Brendan. I'm 61.
Me too.
I'm 61 and I love to always be learning new things that I've never done before. So this year, 2018, was my year of learning to dance. I had never danced.
Cool.
And I went and actually learned how to dance. So I've been going to this dance class called Fusion. And Fusion, it's got elements of waltz and salsa and all these, and ballroom dancing and everything, but it's actually it's become its own method. So with fusion dancing, you have a lead and a follow, and you dance together. And so, over time, actually, I've gotten not so clumsy as I used to be. I'm really enjoying dance.
Right.
So last Friday, I went along to the fusion class. And what happens is you go and you ask different people to dance. So I asked this woman if she'd like to dance, and she said yes, and we started dancing. And at the beginning, I had the sense that I was leading, and she was following. And at a certain point, it's like, whoa, suddenly we were just tearing across the dance floor. And I was going backwards, so I was really having to run backwards to keep up with her, because we were just ripping across this dance floor from one side to the other, like really fast. And I thought, wow, we could have had an accident. We were like running across the dance floor together. And then the other way, we were just tearing around. And finally, when it slowed down a little bit, I said, whoa, you were really going fast there. I was having trouble keeping up with you. And she said, what do you mean? I was following. And so actually, we were both following. We both thought the other one was leading, but we both had the experience of following. We were, as a couple, we were being danced by something that we don't know what it is. And that happens sometimes, and really it's those moments where we are being danced that life has meaning, that life has meaning. So I've completely forgotten what you asked me now, but that's what I want to say anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful perspective that you're sharing there. It's like you moved into that state of unity and allowing something bigger than you both essentially through, and you're talking about how, these two, I sort of refer to it sometimes as a divine dichotomy, two apparently contradictory things that both hold true. You and I are separate. You and I are one. It depends on the perspective from which we are viewing. And I like to say it's relative truths, right? From one perspective, it's very obvious that you and I are separate. From another, more philosophical, albeit from my perspective, and I think yours, very real, and even maybe a greater truth. You and I are one. The consciousness that animates my form is the consciousness that animates your form. And so it's as we become more and more aware of these relative truths in this phenomenon, and you are coming together with others that are sort of resonating with those same ideas and principles in philosophies, I feel like it's we open up a container where these merging, kind of can happen in a similar way to, like you said, in sexual experiences, maybe one where people are the most familiar, but now in dance with a stranger, now in, coming together in a group setting where people start, really feeling connected in a way that they haven't before. And I've certainly seen a lot of that in the community that I'm a part of. It just seems to be like there's this ever thinning veil between self and others that is really fascinating, that's unfolding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I think I completely agree with what you've said. And I think really the key to all this is how to make it practical, so that, because it's easy to be a completely separate person, having the kind of emotions that go along with feeling separate, like resentment, competition, withholding, lying. It's easy to be a separate person behaving in a separate way with a belief in oneness, a belief that we are all one. But that doesn't really make any difference at all. To be behaving as separate, but with a philosophical framework about oneness doesn't make any difference.
Right.
What makes a difference is to actually experience this bigger force dancing you, such that your emotions, your emotional reaction to life changes, so that you no longer feel competitive, because it's obvious in a visceral way that you and the other are one. In the same way, let's think of a mother. A mother gives birth to a baby.
Yeah.
And so on Monday, she had a big belly. Oh, this is my big belly. On Tuesday, she gives birth. On Wednesday, she's holding this baby, right? She's holding the baby, nursing the baby. So 48 hours ago, that was part of my body. Now it's a separate baby, and I'm looking in my baby's eyes. There is no possibility in that moment of feeling competitive with the baby, because it's so recently was you that that feeling of oneness remains. So we know that it is possible to relate to another human being emotionally without the characteristics of separation. And that means without competition, without judgment, without resentment, without withholding. And so that's what's important, is not only that we kind of believe in oneness, but that it actually becomes our living reality. And that, I think, is really what the book Radical Brilliance is about. It's recognizing this is not just about spiritual practice in the way we've defined it. It's actually requires the coming together of completely opposing values and opposing value sets that seem to contradict each other in order to really fully and genuinely live this as a human being.
Very, very fascinating. And I would like to switch to a question that popped up here for me. I noticed that you advocate getting up insanely early in the morning. Why is that?
Yeah, so there's the book Radical Brilliance is divided into two parts. Part one is called The Map, and it presents this model we've talked about, the brilliance cycle. Part two is called The Territory. So the first part of the book, The Map, is really it's giving you the context to understand cognitively why and how brilliance occurs. But the territory really comes down to the nitty-gritty of how do brilliant people actually live. So and in that second part, we cover all sorts of things. We cover diet, supplementation, sexuality, friendships, sitting, all sorts of things. One of the things we talk about is sleep. Now, what I've discovered interviewing so many hundreds of brilliant people is people who are incredibly brilliant generally don't have conventional sleep patterns. By conventional sleep patterns, I mean, the what people have come to regard as kind of normal is going to bed, somewhere around 10 or 11, and then sleeping 8 hours and waking up somewhere around 7, but however, what I've noticed with really brilliant people is a few, but it's definitely in the minority, a few people stay up really late at night, but the great majority wake up extremely early in the morning. By extremely early, I mean at least an hour before the dawn. Like I was awake at 4 this morning, and the sun came up about 5:30. And that time between 4 and 5:30 is the most important part of my day. Now, let me just explain that a minute, because this is 2018. It's hard to believe that it's less than 100 years that any human beings living, in domestic, in homes, it's less than 100 years that we have had access to electricity in homes. So if you go back to before 1920, we didn't have electricity domestically. It seems extraordinary to believe, but before that, people were living with candles. Now, and candles, back then were produced from beeswax, so it was very, very precious commodity. So if you're living that way, and if we go back, a bit longer, then we get back to basically tribal, or or even nomadic existence. If you're living that way, you've got to do all your eating when the sun is high in the sky. So that means the main time to eat food is in the middle of the day. You eat, and then you don't eat much in the evening because the sun's going down. So you eat what you can, but you've got to make sure not only that you do your eating when there's still daylight, but you've got to do all your cleaning up. Otherwise, you're going to get ants and rats and everything. So that means, you know, Homo sapiens, the particular kind of monkey that we are examples of, we have evidence of Homo sapiens being around for about 260,000 years, but we are just a type of Homo. All of the other kinds of Homo, like Homo erectus and our cousins have all become extinct. So Homo as a kind of monkey is about 2 million years. And out of that 259,000 years, it's only 100 out of 259,000 that we've lived in this way. For all of the rest of our development, we lived in harmony with the circadian rhythms, which means we would eat lightly in the evening, go to sleep soon after the sun went down. Because if you're relying upon candlelight, how long can you stay up after the sun's gone down? So that means you go to sleep very soon after the sun goes down. Now, the human body only needs 8 hours of sleep. And if you go to bed that early, you're going to need less sleep, which means you naturally wake up before the sun comes up, just like other mammals do, you know? And so basically, you have this time before the dawn where it's too early to do much cooking or anything. So what do? You sit and you wait for the sun to come up. Then the sun comes up and there's this incredible rush of energy around the dawn. You know, most people, this sounds like, oh, that's too weird, you know, or I'm a night person, but actually it's natural. There's an incredible rush of energy. The birds start singing. Everybody's like, whoa, party, party, party. The sun's coming up, you know. There's incredible rush of energy. And that is the time when you're going to have brilliant original ideas. That's when your mind is really able to, to bring in this kind of brilliance. And then you have breakfast, you know, because you're hungry by then. And then you have lunch, and then you eat lightly. So that's basically how I've retrained myself, because I'm interested in being as brilliant as possible. I've retrained myself. You know, last night I went to bed about 9:30. I was in bed by 9. I was asleep by 9:30. Woke up at 4. You know, maybe I'll have a nap in the middle of the day, but my big meal today is going to be 12:30. That will be most of my food eaten. Then in the evening, I just have soup. And I coach people. You know, I have clients, and all of my coaching clients, without exception, they all have projects which are potentially game-changing for everybody. I only actually coach people who want to thoroughly disrupt some kind of industry or some aspect of life. And so I recommend to everybody, you know, I ask people to give it a shot, is experiment with living in this way, is waking up and at least an hour before the dawn. And everybody who tries it, they stick with it. They go, wow, this is so much better. This works so much better.
Wow, interesting. And you said that you tend to need, did I hear you say you tend to need less sleep if you're going to bed earlier?
Well, you've probably heard that whole adage that an hour of sleep before midnight is worth 2 hours after midnight. And there's actually
I haven't.
No. Well, that's explained in the book. It's basically all of the medical traditions which existed before electricity. So that doesn't, in allopathic medicine, is a very, very, very young discipline. You know, it's really just come into existence in the last decades. But Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years. So has Ayurvedic medicine. All these old traditions, they explain how the body regenerates itself according to times of day. All the repair that your body can experience happens at certain times. So the liver, for example, repairs itself. This is all written very clearly in the book. The liver repairs itself between 1 and 3, but you need to be in deep delta sleep in order for that to happen. So if you don't go to bed till 11 o'clock, your body will not have reached the deep enough sleep for your liver to thoroughly regenerate itself. So you really need to be going to bed at least before 10. After 10 o'clock, the possibility of getting deep restorative sleep is really greatly reduced, you know? So 10 o'clock is about the latest that you want to be actually falling asleep.
Interesting. Well, we're getting down to it here with time. That it's going quick, and I like to ask you with a little bit of time we have left. I always like to have a story of some kind, preferably a story of synchronicity or serendipity, or even a positive paranormal story. If you have something like that up your sleeve, I'd love to hear it. Got anything good for us?
Yeah, I tell you, my story is I got invited to be on this podcast with this amazing guy. And boy, we got on this podcast together, and the time just sped by, and we found that we had all these kind of recognitions of oneness and all these things at the same time. And we kind of formed this new brotherhood. And that's really, that's the story that I always like to live in, is the present moment. That's the only story that really interests me. Everything else is kind of already gone past its shelf life.
All right. I love that. It's all happening and beginning here and moving forward, right? As Alan Watts talked to us about, very impactfully. I actually shared a clip where he was just talking about that very thing a couple days ago. So that is the perfect story. I appreciate that. So,
only story there is.
Yeah, the only story there is. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So, before we do jump off here and wind things down, I know the listeners certainly will want to be checking out your latest book, and probably some of the others that you've had, Translucent Revolution and some of the other books, which we really didn't get the time to talk about. What is the best way for people to connect with you? And do you have, and you also have a program that you would like to make a special offer to them as well, correct?
Sure. Yeah. So if you go, we've set up a page for your friends. If you go to radicalbrilliance.com/positive-head. Let me say it again. radicalbrilliance.com/ and then positive-head. There's a welcome page. I'll be there to greet you, a little video, and that will just explain to you everything we've got going on. I would suggest start with the book, but we also have the Global Practice Community. And for the Global Practice Community is like it's a community where we teach you all of the different practices to move through, but you also have access to webinars with me and to coaches who can guide you. So that will all be explained after you register. And the Global Practice Community is the kind of normal price is $1 a day, or which comes to about $300 a year, because you get a discount when you do the year. But for your friends, for a very limited time, if you listen to this live, for a limited time, we can give you lifetime membership of the Global Practice Community for $100, which is like massive saving. And it's because, to be honest, it's a little bit still in its beta stage. So you might find a few kinks here and there, but that's a huge saving. And so $100 for life instead of $300 a year.
Yeah, well, wow, that's definitely very gracious and generous of you, and I think I can take a kink or bump in the road for 2/3 off. And of course, for those who are listening to this years down the road, that it won't necessarily still be there, but obviously just checking out.
Whoever's listening in the future, if you go to radicalbrilliance.com/positive-head, we'll definitely have some nice offer for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Gotcha. That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right.
Well, this has been amazing, Arjuna. I really, really appreciate you and all the work that you're doing in the world. It's definitely been wonderful to connect. I do have one last question I'd like to leave you with. I do, in my predictable questioning, I always start with the same question and end with the same question. And my ending question is, and I kind of have a guess as to how you're going to answer this based off of your story, but what is the meaning of life, according to Arjuna Adargh, in 60 seconds or less?
I don't need 60 seconds. Contribution.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Arjuna, you are an inspiration, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and connect. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. May your next nows be as brilliant as this one.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting, your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.